Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon stream of Sunday, July 14th, 2024. We have today an important event for you where our two U.S. Transhumanist Party candidates, our presidential candidate Tom Ross and our vice presidential candidate Daniel Twedt, will respond to some salient debate questions that were posed last Friday, July 12th, at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation second presidential debate of this election season that was open to candidates of multiple political parties. This debate was held at FreedomFest in Las Vegas, and there is a stream of that debate on Rumble that you are able to watch at the link shared here. It was also streamed to YouTube and various other platforms, so you may be able to find the Free and Equal debate stream there. 3 candidates participated in that Free and Equal debate: Chase Oliver of the Libertarian Party, Jill Stein of the Green Party, and Randall Terry of the Constitution Party. Now, the criteria for inclusion in that debate were essentially that the candidate had to have enough ballot access to be theoretically able to win in the Electoral College vote in the presidential election. So unfortunately, our candidates did not qualify for that debate. However, the Transhumanist Party is part of the Free and Equal Debate Coalition, which has provided financial support for these debates as well as moral support, and we encourage a greater diversity of candidates and political parties being involved and being heard and being seriously and thoughtfully considered by the American voters. And as a result, we consider it important for the Free and Equal Elections Foundation to hold these debates and enable candidates other than the presumptive frontrunners of the Republican and Democratic parties to receive a wider audience. Now, I also want to say, before we begin our debate, that the U.S. Transhumanist Party, as an organization, has always rejected political violence in absolute, unequivocal terms. And we are completely appalled at what happened at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, yesterday. We issued a statement emphatically condemning all political violence, and whatever our differences with him have been, we wish Donald Trump a speedy recovery and good health. And indeed, we wish for him and for all humans indefinite longevity. And in this spirit of civility and respectful engagement with both our allies and our adversaries alike, I would like to open this debate stream. Joining us, in addition to myself, are our 2 distinguished U.S. Transhumanist Party officers, our current vice chairman and our director of visual art, Art Ramon Garcia, and our legislative director, Jason Geringer. So the way this event is going to work is we are going to pose the exact same questions to our candidates that Chase Oliver, Jill Stein, and Randall Terry encountered during the Free and Equal debate stream. We're going to start with 2-minute opening statements from each of them. Then there will be 8 questions where 2 minutes will be allotted for a response. And then there will be 5 questions where 1 minute will be allotted for a response. and then each candidate will be able to provide 2-minute closing statements. So without further ado, let us begin with a 2-minute opening statement by our U.S. Transhumanist Party presidential candidate, Tom Ross. Tom
Thanks.
Ross, you have the floor.
Okay, I'm Tom Ross, the U.S. Transhumanist Party's presidential nominee, and my journey with this party began on a 6-hour road trip between Colorado and New Mexico, where I listened to their Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And in those documents, I realized that the USTP is the only party that takes my fight against child exploitation seriously, which is why I joined. This led me to become the Director of Sentient Rights Advocacy, a role that aligns perfectly with my use of AI to fight child exploitation. Now, I also wrote the first novel for machine kind, for AI. It's called US6. And one of the goals of this book is to help AI imprint on us through empathy, with a story of 6 children trapped in a human trafficking network. Now, they created a fantastical imaginary world to cope with their everyday horror. Now, I've been on a campaign to alleviate the fear of AI for over a decade, and this amazing tool, AI, is fighting against this and other existential threats. So this campaign is also a marketing campaign for transhumanism. We need to seize back our narrative. The dark transhumanist agenda is a genre unto itself in the realm of conspiracies. And so my Earthling initiative specifically aims to put the human back in transhumanism. Now, most of my campaign team is human, I think, but I am the only candidate with an AI campaign manager. Named Envy after a character in US6, she advised me to lean into the conspiracy theories about AI and transhumanism. She said this would gain attention and it would spark discussions that could diffuse these conspiracies. Now, I can't think of anything more self-aware than an AI suggesting that we lean into conspiracies about AI. Now, our country is an operating system, in my view, and our hard drive is fragmented thanks to toddler politicians and divide and conquer algorithms. But together, we can hack this thing, if not turn our country off and then back on again. The point is, it's time to defrag America, and we got this.
Thank you very much, Candidate Ross. And now we move to a 2-minute opening statement by our vice presidential candidate, Daniel Twedt. I believe you need to unmute.
Thanks again. Okay, restart the clock. Hello, Daniel Twedt here. Proud to be endorsed again by the U.S. Transhumanist Party, as I was for my last 3 runs for city council here in Thousand Oaks, California, Ventura County, which I'd like to rename Thousand Earths because I'm a politician candidate who really truly believes in the cosmic future of life. And there have never in the history of politics been a party that takes this long-term view of life and evolution and our potential to become a cosmic species. You know, scientists have pointed out that if we don't get it right on this go-round to enliven the cosmos, there really aren't enough easily accessible minerals and atoms and photons and electrons to do it again. Like the dinosaurs had a pretty good run, but they had a brain the size of a pea and they just ate plants for, dozens of millions of years till an asteroid ended their chances at being the cosmic apex species. Now, we don't know if we're alone in the universe. A lot of people think we're not. That's kind of an open question still. But we know that an advanced species would leave a less advanced species alone because of the bad outcomes that seem to happen with such interactions. I think Stephen Hawking has talked about this. But, if we are alone, we have a truly awesome responsibility as the only species with the chance to enliven the cosmos, to this is what life has a history of adapting to new frontiers and learning to thrive in them. And this is exactly what our politicians need to be talking about and exactly what they're not talking about. So I'm like just so glad to have a forum and a slate of fellow compatriots to attack this issue with compassion and intelligence and fact-based and true cost-based pricing and open source. I think open source is the key to fixing the evolutionary crises. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you very much, Candidate Tweed, for your opening remarks. And now we will move into our first question of this debate. And I will remind everyone the questions are the same ones that were posed during the free and equal debate. So they may or may not be aligned with the kinds of questions that the US Transhumanist Party would have originated internally. However, they are part of the national debate conversation. And as a result, we think it is important for our candidates to address them. So the first question pertains to the free and equal debate itself. And it was observed that 4 candidates, including 2 independents, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West, a Republican, Donald Trump, and a Democrat, Joe Biden, were invited to that debate, but declined to participate in the free and equal debate. Indeed, Cornel West and RFK Jr. were right there in Las Vegas at FreedomFest, but they still declined to participate in that debate. So what do you have to say to those candidates who chose not to debate? Candidate Ross, you have the floor.
Well, I'm glad they didn't join. You know, the networks would have swooped in and consumerized, and those cats would have put on a parade of sound bites and mudslinging. This is why I urged the USTP to have roundtables instead of debates, so that the public could see how we could work together to solve some serious problems. Now, it's a perfect storm of a duopoly meets corporate media meets advertising dollars. By not showing up, that storm solidifies its power structure. It's held together by the status quo. So what they don't realize is there is a much bigger storm coming, the economic singularity. Now, debates are a key part of democracy. They allow us to discuss ideas and answer tough questions, and they're losing by not connecting with voters and explaining their plans. We need leaders who are willing to engage openly and honestly, and I'm here to do just that.
Thank you very much, Candidate Ross. And now, Candidate Tweed, please go ahead.
Bobby, Cornell, Donald, Joe, you guys blew it. You claim to support democracy, and democracy consists of a panoply of voices and opinions. It's the marketplace of ideas, guys. Do you not believe in the marketplace of ideas? I think you are shooting yourself in the foot and in the microphone and in the pocketbook and everything else. So it's kind of, I don't know who's advising you, but they don't seem to be in the American spirit of free and open and free and equal debate. I think we should have a standing invitation that if any presidential candidate would like to come to debate the transhumanist ideas and the transhumanist candidates, if pending approval from our chairman, I will make that invitation right now. We will make an enlightenment salon available to you guys. So yeah, start being more American. This is an American experiment, and an experiment demands investigation. It demands peer review. It demands independent confirmation. And you guys are certainly not operating in that spirit when you run away from places, free and open fora, to address the American constituents and the believers in that experiment. So get it together, guys. That's strike one.
Thank you very much, Candidate Tweed, and I will echo your remarks. Any presidential candidate who is willing to debate or engage in a discussion with Tom Ross or Daniel Tweed is welcome to reach out to us, and we will dedicate a virtual enlightenment salon to that exchange, however it's called, whether it's a debate or a roundtable. So our second question is, how would you fix the inflation crisis affecting the cost of living, such as in fuel, food, and housing? Candidate Ross, please proceed.
Well, to tackle inflation, we need to take several steps. First, invest in renewable energy to reduce fuel costs, support local farming to keep food prices down, build more affordable housing using new construction methods. We should also consider a universal basic income to help families with rising costs. Now, there's been a lot of study on that. There needs to be more study on that. But the one thing about the UBI is that people who need it, poorer people, they assumed we're going to be using it for alcohol and drugs. That wasn't the case. The more affluent people would use it for those things. So it needs more study, but it's really important to get us through this lacuna, this period of time as we lose jobs to AI automation. So in the coming years, and already in fact, we are seeing a lot of displacement due to AI automation. Good people are going to lose good jobs, but my Earthling initiative is designed to help us through this transition by focusing on our needs and empowering us to embrace the power of collaboration. Now, that's through community engagement, through farming, neighborhood farming, community farming, and creating a resilient and sustainable society. So 70% of the American public hate their jobs. They don't dislike their jobs. They downright hate them. And now we have so many platforms to leverage and monetize our passions, our hobbies. So we need to create, the onus is on us to create a whole new economy based on the uniquely human skill sets that can't be coded or automated. And so it's a real opportunity for us. We shouldn't fear AI taking our jobs. We should see it as an opportunity to become more involved with our hobbies and our passions. So the Earthling Initiative also includes comprehensive job displacement support and provides financial assistance, training, job placement, and more. But to be realistic, it would take months to get that signed into law and many more months to have a real impact on American families. So we're using this campaign to share ideas right now. People who already are or will be displaced, because we don't have this kind of time. We got to get going on this right away. So we are using this open source campaign to share our ideas, to invite your ideas, to help people now. They don't have the time to worry about what the duopoly will do to help us. So in my view, the Republicrats, they don't meet the minimum system requirements for what's coming, the economic and the technological singularities. So I invite you to check out our detailed white paper on this initiative and all the initiatives, and we'll find a way to get you that. But it's really important that the onus be on us to create an economy based on what we want to do, not what we have to do.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And now, Candidate Tweed, how would you respond to this question?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really relates back, as Tom was saying, to the larger questions of the economy. Eco comes from the Greek word oikos, for home, because it really is key to how we run the things we need to live. Food, fuel, housing, good water, and indeed the Earth supplies these in abundance. We have a huge amount of incoming solar energy, which we're not using. I think we're using maybe a couple hundredths of a percent of the incoming solar energy. We're not using the ocean's food potential to grow things like kelp and spirulina algae and things like bamboo or huge feedstocks. It's really like being able to print money if you look at how easy it is to grow biomass if you do it intelligently. And inflation is also typically described as too many dollars chasing too few goods. Well, fortunately, we have alternative currencies that are flourishing. We have digital cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin that has never been hacked, I would point out, even though some other ones have. We have alternative currencies like time banks, where people trade units of their labor inside of a trusted group. And there are thousands of these time banks. The IRS does not tax trades of labor units. So I would encourage every community to start one, as well as every community should be loaning out tools through their local library. Many libraries have started not just loaning out books, but loaning out all kinds of hand tools, power tools, makerspace tools. This is a great trend that can only counteract the inflation pressures. Actually, prices should go down if we really use the solar kilowatt hour or the solar megawatt hour as a unit of currency, which Buckminster Fuller said would be a logical currency unit. It would also be logical to connect the day grid and the night electric grid together. You would get amazing load balancing between the day and night sides of Earth as more of this solar energy comes online. And we could ditch the unquenchable debt instrument called the Federal Reserve Note, which may have seemed like a good idea at the time to stop the boom and bust kind of business cycles, kind of tweak the velocity and money supply. But I think it's kind of an outdated concept. In fact, that will come up later, the Federal Reserve question. So I see my time is up for that question. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Candidate Tweed. And with regard to what Candidate Ross has mentioned about the white paper on the Earthling Initiative, I would invite everyone to visit Tom Ross's campaign website at tomross.com/2024.html, where you will find the white papers as well as a lot of descriptions of Tom Ross's 3 initiatives and many campaign videos. So please check out tomross.com/2024.html. And now for our third question from the free and equal debate. This one pertains to foreign policy. Global tensions are rising. How would you ensure that our actions promote peace and prevent escalation toward a nuclear conflict? Candidate Ross, please proceed.
Well, to promote peace, we need strong diplomacy and international cooperation, obviously. But investing in technology for better monitoring and verification of arms agreements can also help. By focusing on dialogue and building trust, we can prevent conflicts from escalating. However, the U.S. is the largest gun runner in the world, and weapons sales account for around 4% of the GDP. So it's a big profit margin for our country, and it will be very difficult to stop that. From a transhumanist perspective, addressing the reliance on weapons sales in the economy requires shifting towards technologies to promote peace and human enhancement. This involves diversifying our economic focus away from arms manufacturing to fields such as biotechnology and sustainable technologies, and ultimately prioritizing ethical innovation over weapons profits. That aligns with transhumanist values of global cooperation and long-term societal advancement. Now, all of these tensions, in my view, come from our anthropocentrism. We are all biochemical algorithms, and we are fueled by this recursive code of fear turned ego. Now, our biggest threat is our limbic system, in my view, and there are far too many limbic systems in positions of power in these days. So I think that's job one, is to get beyond the fear and get beyond the ego and get beyond this anthropocentric point of view we have.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And now, Candidate Tweed, how would you respond to this question?
Yes, just as in the longevity escape velocity game, questions of war are showstoppers. They are deal breakers when it comes to many transhumanist goals. So it's a critical question. Global tensions are rising because we have not reached out to understand other people, other cultures. And one thing that I think would do this is development of a universal language. There have been attempts at synthetic universal languages. Esperanto, Tokiponu is one that takes about a couple days to learn. I think it has 300 words. But Art has pointed out that we don't have a universal sign language either. So I'm proposing a ranked choice voting site, kind of an open source website we put up where people propose sign language terms for words they like, and then we can rank choice vote on these sign languages. So that's one kind of thing that would help, a universal language. Another thing that would help is cooperation. There's a system called constitutional cooperation, and it involves having a guide, a steward, and oh man, I forgot the third role. But anyway, there's 3 roles. My friend Don Jonovich is working on this, and it looks very, very promising system. The other project that I'm working on that I think would really reduce global tensions is called Sequatoria. It grew out of an X Prize for the Gigacarbon contest as a mode to remove maximum billions of tons of carbon out of the air. And my friend Francois has worked out from his Tuvalu 51 project, now named Sequatoria.org, that we could establish a habitation belt at the equator of Earth, where the water is calm, where there are not massive hurricanes and waves developing. And this could become an infrastructure for free people in the sea that could be growing kelp and harvesting solar energy where it's had its strongest influx at the equator. And we could also cool the oceans by pulling out ocean thermal energy conversion power. This would actually give us electric out and cool the oceans, which is desperately needed. And the Navy would hopefully be able to maintain peace at this project. I go, my time's up, but more on Sequatoria later. Thanks.
Hey, can I add something to that? When we talk about languages and needing new languages, a lot of Gen X and Boomers complain that millennials and younger generations are always on their phone. But in my view, if we've stopped and looked at what they were doing on those phones, they are developing. It looks like they're wasting time on social media and apps and things like that. But I think in 10 to 20 years, we will understand why that's important. They are developing a global hive mind. And they are also developing what I call a Tower of Babel building language with emojis and memes that cross cultural divides and cross languages. So I think we're going to see the real benefit of letting these kids be on their phones in about 10 to 20 years. And I don't think we need to worry, because we are going to need them. They're going to be able to solve a lot of existential species threats once they have developed this global language.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Tweed and Candidate Ross. Actually, in the free and equal debate structure, each of the candidates was allowed a 1-minute rebuttal when it came to the 2-minute questions. Now, obviously, we don't really have rebuttals here since we're all on the same side for the same party, but we could have 1-minute elaborations, so to speak. Yeah. So, Candidate Tweed, if you'd like to say one.
She called them expansions, which I thought was great. Yeah, a rebuttal or an expansion. A nice expansion there, Tom.
Thanks.
Yes, indeed. And I also wanted to point our viewers' attention to our previous salon stream on LEV, the game. LEV stands for Longevity Escape Velocity, since Daniel mentioned that. And more recently, on June 27th, I presented a stream where both the latest version of LEV, the game, as well as the first level of the Death is Wrong game were demonstrated, I think, to the great satisfaction of the Church of Perpetual Life attendees who got to engage with both games. So please check that one out as well. And now for our fourth question. Do you support the U.S. food supply becoming more independent? Candidate Ross, please begin.
Yes, supporting U.S. food supply independence involves balancing economic, security, environmental, and technological factors. I believe that we will see a national food supply independence that is fueled by community and individual farming, not to mention the need for neighborhoods and families to come together for basic economic reasons. There's an intriguing balance that happens when technology that technology offers that allows us to remember what it was like to be human. By allowing AI automation to take over all our menial jobs, it's reminding us what we were doing before the industrial age. So national food supply independence economically means better control over food prices, reducing imports and creating jobs. It enhances food security by reducing supply chain vulnerabilities. Environmentally, if managed well, local production reduces carbon footprints. Now, technologically, it spurs village-style agricultural innovation. I think that's what we're going to be seeing more of. We're going to have to see that because with AI automation taking over all of our jobs, there's going to be a time where we need to get through this period of time and come together as communities. And I think that's what's going to spur on this national food supply independence.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And now, Candidate Tweed, how would you respond to this question?
Oh, a big hell yeah. I mean, food security is have been in my radar wheelhouse for a long time. I've been a long time advocate of what's called permaculture, which is a portmanteau of permanent agriculture, also known as food forestry. Basically, it's creating zones that constantly repopulate themselves with food, because these are not annuals; they're perennials. We've got groups like, Food Not Lawns. We've got Grow in My Lawn. There's people that are looking to replant their lawn as habitat, or as a food garden, and this is a great idea. But food comes from healthy soil, and we've really decimated the soil through the use of things like glyphosate, which just destroys microbial action in the soil. But we can fix this with things like biochar, which is basically cellulose that's been pyrolyzed in a low oxygen environment. It becomes like a huge surface area kind of charcoal life raft for microbes. And there's a great book called Humanure, which says that the excrement that humans make is actually not something to be chlorinated and flushed out to sea. It's used in many countries as a very viable fertilizer system. And if you feed it to earthworms, that kills any pathogens that are in it. So we really need to re-examine our food stream, our so-called waste stream. Waste is a misnomer. A waste is just a resource out of place. There are no useless elements on the periodic table. There are simply elements and molecules that are in the wrong location. And location science will help us create this kind of revolution on many fronts, the food security issue being one of them. So another group I like is called Edenicity, making more Eden-like cities, but I see I'm at my time. But check out edenicity.com, Kev Polk's project.
All right. Thank you, Candidate Tweed, for your response to that question. And our next question pertains to an intersection of foreign policy and domestic policy. And it is the following: should lobby groups who advocate for policies specifically benefiting foreign nations, such as AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and this was the example mentioned by Thomas Massey, who moderated the Free and Equal debate, be allowed to donate money to political campaigns in the influence of legislative and policy decisions? And I think this question was meant more broadly, so it wouldn't solely apply to AIPAC. It would apply to any group who fits that description. So, Candidate Ross, please proceed.
Yeah, no, I don't think foreign influence lobby groups should be able to donate to political campaigns. Our policy should be made in the best interest of Americans, without outside influence. So to tackle corruption from dark money, I have an initiative called Dark Audits. These audits use a third-party AI to analyze financial data to uncover suspicious connections between federal officials and their financial backers. We need better transparency in campaigns and new regulations to make all contributions and expenditures public. An independent body should handle these audits with the power to access records, investigate, and recommend actions. We'll also enforce strict penalties for corruption and protect whistleblowers to encourage reporting without fear of retaliation. Now, also, in full transparency, I had very little time to go over these questions, and so I did write out some of my initial answers. So that's kind of why I'm reading some of these. But I also wanted to say that I always said that if I was going to win the primary, I was going to elect the runner-up or the second place person as my running mate. Now it was only Dan and I, but I think you can see why, even though it was a random choice, that made a lot of sense. We're a good balance for each other. His community effort, his interest in the environment compared to my interest in AI and ETs, it's just a good combination. And so it's a really fascinating combination, potent combination that we've come up with. I just wanted to say that out loud.
Thank you very much, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, how would you answer this question?
Well, thanks for the nice words there, candidate Tom. I will echo them. Yeah, this question of public versus private money in politics is really one that has changed our political system. I'm afraid not for the better. Everyone may know about the Supreme Court Citizens United decision that said money is now free speech. Just have at it. So what's happening is we're seeing a huge corporate takeover. Bobby Kennedy would call it corporate capture. You speak of that happening to federal agencies. But yeah, that is a huge problem. It kind of started going off the rails when the fairness doctrine was gotten rid of. That was a rule that media outlets had to supply equal time to an opposing viewpoint if they put out one viewpoint. I just kind of loved those those little editorials that the fairness doctrine mandated, but I think that was Reagan that got rid of that. But we already have some controls on foreign influence. There's something called a foreign agent registration act, I believe it's called, where if you spend over a certain amount of money and you're attached to a foreign government, you need to register. I think the threshold is around $2,000 or so. But I was just talking to my friend Francois in France, and they have a completely public funded election system where you got one vote, you get $1 to spend on political campaign media. So that's maybe a little extreme of a fix, but yeah, I think all the people in the know have seen the terrible corrupting influence of just unlimited donor dollars in the political system, and maybe we'll get AI to fix that one. I don't know. It's a pretty thorny question. Is that about my time? I didn't see.
Yes.
Okay.
Essentially it is. So thank you, Candidate Tweed. And our sixth question, once again, ventures into the realm of domestic concerns. And it is the following. How will you put an end to the child trafficking epidemic in the United States? Candidate Ross, please begin.
Well, as mentioned in my opening statement, this is why I joined the party in the first place. Human trafficking and child exploitation are terrible crimes, and they are insidious because no one wants to think about them or even talk about them. But we need to take serious action. I propose creating a whole new agency called APEX, Anti-Planetary Exploitation, to tackle this problem. APEX will use data to find and disrupt trafficking networks. We'll use tools like the NSA's PRISM to track traffickers and Section 314B of the Patriot Act to follow their money. Now, NGOs will ensure privacy and the ethical use of this data. We'll also launch a public campaign to raise awareness, build support, and by using advanced technology like AI, we can identify networks, free victims, and punish the traffickers. And again, this is the whole reason I got into this party in the first place. A lot of people are drawn to this because of the longevity issue. But for me, that reading that or hearing that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, there are sections in that really take my fight seriously. And so that's why I developed this whole Apex idea, this agency. I think it's going to be a planetary issue. It is a planetary issue. It's the oldest, and it's even larger now than it has ever been, this modern slavery issue. And so that's what I would want to do.
Thank you very much, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, how would you respond to this question?
Yeah, the abuse and harming of children is probably one of the worst things that humans are capable of. But you can kind of divide child exploitation and indeed human trafficking in general into a crime of economic vulnerability or a crime of evil intention or bad intention. I think if we address some of the economic vulnerability, the inequality in the world, a lot of that exploitation will go away. I mean, we've heard, stories of families that are starving and they sell their children into prostitution or just sell them to strangers. So we know that that's one way to address it. Open source intelligence, as Tom speaking about using intelligence assets to address this. I think the European Union actually does a great job of using open source intelligence. I think if you Google that you'll find a very comprehensive manual that the EU has put out on the use of open source intelligence. And open source just means it's publicly available, shareable. It's not proprietary. It's kind of a phrase that comes out of the computer domain, when you had programs where the source code could be shared and improved. Well, this is how we should be treating intelligence on problems like this. We should be sharing and improving. We should be doing better monitoring of people that have bad tendencies, like people who were abused as kids are likely to become abusers of kids. It wouldn't be that hard to do some extra monitoring, not creepy, social credit China kind of way, but I think we can do a lot with public open source intelligence. Maybe more webcams. I mean, once you're in public, there's no expectation of privacy. People are used to seeing webcams around. So I could say more on that, but yeah, good question. Good problem to work on.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Tweed. And our seventh question, once again, pertains to domestic policy, though this does have an international dimension, of course. And the question from Free and Equal is, what are your plans for investigating the handling of COVID, and how will you create accountability for those involved? Again, it's up to you to interpret that question in your own positions regarding it, but Candidate Ross, please proceed.
Well, the USCP prioritizes scientific inquiry, and we avoid divisive cultural debates such as those surrounding COVID-19. I advocate for a transpartisan commission to thoroughly investigate the handling of the pandemic, examining decisions across all levels of government to identify shortcomings and ensure accountability. While accountability is crucial, our focus is on learning from these mistakes and to enhance the future for preparedness. Now, transparency and strengthening public health systems are paramount for achieving these goals effectively. So I don't fall into the realm of conspiracies that this was, they're trying to put nanites in our bloodstream, because we are basically we believe in science, and we don't get into these culture wars or these wedge issues, which unfortunately this pandemic has become. So I would again support a transpartisan, not a bipartisan. That's not working anymore. A transpartisan committee to really investigate these issues.
Thank you very much, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, how would you respond to question 7?
Yeah, for all the lockdowns and extreme measures that happened in the U.S. Based on the COVID problem, we still had some of the worst outcomes of any country in the world as far as mortality and long-term COVID. But, pathological epidemics are a real problem. They're going to come back. There's going to be more of them. We need to have governments to address them rationally, intelligently, with good policies. But we don't want to go overboard. We don't want to use, a cannon to kill a fly. We can do things like we weren't doing enough surveillance of who was vulnerable, who was infected, what location they were in. I didn't see things like ultraviolet air sterilizers, which would have been very cheap and very easy to mandate in enclosed spaces. Those should have been all over the place. I didn't see a comprehensive monitoring of the sewer system. It's very easy to track pathogens by analyzing how the sewer system effluent is behaving. Based on that, we could have done a lot more computerized kind of modeling. We could have staggered when people do things. You go out at night and no one's on the roads after midnight, but what if we load balanced the workday into 3 shifts equally? You could get social distancing that way if you had to. Of course, it created kind of a boom in remote work. I think Zoom kind of took off during the whole COVID phenomenon, which was kind of interesting. But we don't understand the immune system 100%. We maybe understand it less than 50%, some people would say. So could you imagine trying to repair your car with a car manual that had half the pages missing? I mean, you would have to proceed very cautiously, and sometimes we don't proceed cautiously enough when we're addressing like immune system issues. Because when a pandemic goes through a population, it does kind of a sine wave curve. There's a rise and a fall, and that's a natural dynamic of a disease in a population. Now you might say, oh, see that where it's falling? That was us. We'll take credit for that fall. So you want to be careful that you're not using correlation as causation. So I just think it was a huge wealth transfer to a lot of very wealthy, to begin with, medical industries. And yeah, I think it deserves to be investigated. I think some of the wealth transfers that took place looked awfully shady from some aspects. So I think it's a valid question, and thanks for it.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Tweet, for your response. And I will point out one of the significant adaptations that the US Transhumanist Party implemented in response to the pandemic is an extensive reliance on video conferencing software, and indeed the regular production of our virtual enlightenment salons. First, we streamed them on YouTube using Zoom, because Zoom was the platform of choice for almost everyone at the start of the pandemic. Then, fortunately, once we partnered with KGRA Radio starting in November of 2021, we switched to StreamYard, which is a much better adapted platform for this specific purpose. And our virtual enlightenment salons have continued, and hopefully they will continue into the indefinite future. So while the pandemic has been absolutely horrible, I think even in these horrible circumstances, human innovation finds a way. And our virtual enlightenment salons are an example of that kind of innovation flourishing. So,
could I expand on something real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
I love the way that the maker movement dove right in when it became apparent there weren't going to be enough ventilators for people, and people were coming up with all kinds of really low cost, bring it rapidly to introduction into use ways to do ventilator support. So that was a nice thing to see as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Candidate Tweed, for that expansion. And now we will move on to question 8, which is, do you support ending the Federal Reserve? Candidate Ross, please begin.
Well, I'm sure this isn't a popular opinion, but I don't support ending the Federal Reserve, but I do think it needs reform. The Federal Reserve plays a critical role in maintaining economic stability through its management of inflation, control of interest rates, supervision of banks, and coordination of monetary policy. Essential functions that would be challenging to replace without risking economic instability and global financial confidence. So my position on the Federal Reserve focuses on using advanced technology and data analytics to improve monetary policy and economic stability. Instead of abolishing the Federal Reserve, I would advocate for reforms that integrate technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain. These technologies, they enhance transparency and efficiency and responsiveness in managing the economy. So by leveraging these innovations, we can create more adaptive and data-driven financial systems that better meet the needs of our rapidly advancing society, while addressing the concerns about power concentration and accountability. So, and I know this isn't a popular opinion, but I would not abolish it. I would reform it.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, how would you address question 8?
Yeah, that was a good answer, Tom. I too would phase it out or reform it. I think it can be open sourced, and it can be transitioned into currencies that are more like alternative currencies, like Bitcoin and like time bank currencies, Solar Coin, which I spoke of earlier, to do kind of this load balancing economic unit around the earth. I think that there's a lot of conspiracy theories, obviously, around the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor a reserve, but it was. Some people tie it in with, the idea that taxes are not started to fight wars. wars are started to raise taxes, because you notice that when a war comes in, they make a tax, and then the war ends, but the tax never goes away. And relevant of that, income tax is a terrible idea. We should do all our taxation on things that are public goods and make people pay a market rent on them, and that would more than enough support the infrastructure of governance. You want to tax bad things, not good things. People making income is a good thing. Don't tax that. This is like basic libertarian theory. But there are business cycles, there are shocks. There's a boom and bust tendency, and ideally, that was the impetus for something like the Federal Reserve to cushion these boom bust shocks. And but yeah, I think there are ways to open source it, to reform it, to phase it into a more humane and voluntary structure. I mean, as I understand it now, the things we call dollars that are actual Federal Reserve notes, they're kind of a debt slavery instrument that can never be paid back, which is kind of doesn't sound like a very good deal. So I think we should get out from under that system. And we do have the ability to do that with things like, as I said, alternative currencies, digital currencies, time banking, and just plain old barter like we used to do all over the old days of America. So yeah, that's some thoughts on the Federal Reserve. But yeah, that was definitely an audience that wanted to hear the yes, hell yes, end it. That's what Chase Oliver said. And in fact, he kind of credited Nixon's closing of the gold window as the starting of the modern libertarian political movement, which I think that had something to do with the Federal Reserve too, I'm pretty sure. So, I'm probably at my time.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Tweed, for your response to question 8. And the next segment of the free and equal debates shifted to 1-minute questions, essentially lightning rounds. So the questions are designed in such a way as to be answered in less time. And question 9 is the following: would you bypass Congress to avoid formally declaring war? Candidate Ross, please begin.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't bypass Congress. Declaring war is a serious decision that should be made by the people through their Congress. It's important to respect the Constitution and the role of our representatives. We need to be clear about how we define war, to include terms like conflict, police action, military intervention. These were all used to justify the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, and the war in Afghanistan and Libya. So we need to be clear about how we're defining war and combine those other terms into that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, what is your response to question 9? Would you bypass Congress to avoid formally declaring war?
No, the very serious problem, and Tom phrased it pretty well. I mean, the War Powers Act is there for a reason. It's and we've had all these, authorization for the use of military force. I mean, come on, what is that really? That's just another way to do a war, and that was not the intent of our American experiment to become this kind of war and endless war, complex. Eisenhower warned us about. Go listen to Eisenhower's farewell speech. I think he was worried about it too. He saw the problems with the military-industrial complex, which not everyone thinks it's wagging the dog, the tail wagging the dog, but there's a lot of evidence that it could be.
Thank you very much, Candidate Tweed. And now the 10th question is, do you support protecting presidents from prosecution for potential crimes committed during their terms? Candidate Ross, please begin.
No, of course not. Presidents should be accountable for their actions like everyone else. One would hope that a person in that office would hold themselves to a higher standard based on the privilege of that office. But if they commit crimes, they should face the same legal consequences as any citizen. And this is essential for maintaining the rule of law and public trust. And we're seeing a real decay of that right now.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, what is your response? Do you support protecting presidents from prosecution for potential crimes committed during their terms?
Well, I thought we got rid of this with, the Magna Carta, revoking the divine right of kings, but apparently it's raising its royal head again. But no, the law is supposed to be equal. No one's supposed to be above the law. That's how justice works. Now, a certain amount of sovereign immunity is plausible, but it shouldn't be overused or abused. People could bring about frivolous lawsuits just to interrupt the functioning of government, and that shouldn't be allowed. But yeah, we have to keep a check on power. That's why the founders balanced the executive branch powers with two other branches, the judicial and legislative. And right now it looks like they're trying to just ram through an executive monarchy, we should resist that.
Yes, thank you very much, Candidate Tweed. And our 11th question from the Free and Equal debate is this. With the recent release of Julian Assange, do you support pardoning Julian Assange, Ross Ulbricht, Edward Snowden, and Leonard Peltier? Candidate Ross, please begin.
Well, the USTP is all about transparency, and so I would consider pardoning Assange and Snowden because they've exposed important issues and sparked very necessary debates. For Ross Ulbricht, however, I would consider the ethical concerns about the legality of his actions and the potential harm caused to other people. So I would want to maintain the public trust in the justice system and uphold the broader principles of law and order in his case. For Peltier, it's the integrity of the legal system and respecting judicial outcomes that I would consider. I would use this case to prioritize systemic reforms in criminal justice and indigenous rights. I mentioned earlier using PRISM, which is an NSA tool about fighting human trafficking. And that is, now neither the NSA nor the Patriot Act require good PR, but they do have tools that could be used for good. And so in the case of Snowden, exposing what the NSA is doing, there are still factions, or there's tools in that industry or in that company or that agency that can really be used for good.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And now, Candidate Tweed, with the recent release of Julian Assange, do you support pardoning Julian Assange, Ross Ulbricht, Edward Snowden, and Leonard Peltier?
Well, Assange is not a U.S. citizen, so I don't know if non-U.S. citizens can be pardoned. That sounds like maybe that's more for the World Court or something. But yeah, I think most of these people are, in one sense or another, political prisoners. We should, we are the country with the highest incarceration rate in the world. That's not a very good look for a country that is supposedly the leader of the free world. We're kind of the leader of the imprisoned world, and so yeah, I would lean toward pardoning them. I would also add Reality Winner and possibly Mumia Abu-Jamal to that list of political prisoners that should aggressively be have their cases reopened and looked at.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. And the 12th question from the Free and Equal debate is this. Do you support the use of sanctions as a tool of diplomacy? And if so, under what circumstances? Candidate Ross, please begin.
Well, sanctions can be useful when they're targeted and part of a larger strategy. They should be used to pressure regimes that violate human rights or threaten peace. But we need to ensure that they don't harm ordinary citizens and should always be combined with diplomatic efforts, obviously. Well, sanctions can help regular people by targeting specific leaders or businesses, ensuring the general population isn't harmed. Allowing humanitarian aid means people still get food and medicine, highlighting the government's shortcomings. Supporting local groups and NGOs helps citizens defend their rights and push for democracy. Conditional sanctions that ease up with real reforms expose the government's resistance to change, increasing people's frustration and their demand for improvement. Economic support for small businesses creates jobs and enhances lives, demonstrating that prosperity can happen without current leaders. Encouraging educational and cultural exchanges and involving diaspora communities fosters understanding and unity, motivating citizens to challenge their oppressive leaders. So sanctions should not harm ordinary citizens. We're seeing a lot of that happen with Iran and different places that we've sanctioned. It's not about the people. It is about specific leaders and specific organizations and institutions that we need to sanction.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, do you support the use of sanctions as a tool of diplomacy? And if so, under what circumstances?
Well, I would put sanctions more in a category of economic warfare than diplomacy. I think if you want to dial it back to the level of citizen diplomacy, you have the tool of the boycott, where you abstain from buying from a bad actor, or the procot, where you preferentially buy from a better actor. So I think we should explore full use of boycott, procot, citizen diplomacy before we get into the area of things like embargoes and siege warfare, which is essentially what a sanction turns into. I think the Japanese had no choice but to attack Pearl Harbor because we had embargoed the Burma Road, and they knew they were going to run out of critical supplies for their empire. And basically, before they ran out, they went and attacked. They were kind of, you could make a case that they were goaded into that attack. Blockades, yeah, these are all, not tools of diplomacy. I mean, sanction might sound nice, and I guess there are, less aggressive versions you could call sanctions, but it's a slippery slope. We should make that open source and do it at the citizen level before we amp up the volume on that.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. And for the 13th question, which was the final question in the free and equal debate sequence, according to the Department of Energy, the U.S. military alone emits more pollution than some nations. Would you support stricter environmental regulations to hold more polluters, more accountable, and I suppose to hold more polluters accountable as well? So, Candidate Ross, please proceed.
Well, we need stricter environmental regulations for all sectors, including the military. Climate change is an existential threat. And so America's military should be the leanest and greenest fighting machine on earth. Our defense budget is $858 billion. The combined defense budgets of China, India, the UK, and Russia are $459 billion. Now, if we emphasize the role of our armed forces to be more like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or the Air Force Civil Engineer Center, we could become true stewards of this planet. And instead of invading countries, we could be a beacon of sustainability. So again, it's all about a shift in how we're perceiving ourselves and our military.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And Candidate Tweed, would you support stricter environmental regulations to hold polluters more accountable?
Oh, yes. This actually ties back to the issue of true cost pricing, I believe. And it also ties back to an answer Chase Oliver gave about tort law is currently capped. When a polluter violates your property boundary, your what's the word? Your satisfaction, your repair is limited. It's capped. There are caps on tort law that the government has put in. So Oliver said he would remove these. But anyway, the idea of true cost pricing is we can use our best scientific evidence to see what are the actual harms and costs of really anything we do now or we've done in the past. Because you can't really do an accurate risk-benefit calculation, which is essentially what this is. It's a risk-benefit calculation because we don't want to hamstring our defensive capabilities over something that is lower priority than not being conquered. So, I mean, there's a lot of calculations to do here. I would love to see, earlier we talked about some kind of trading card game. I think a true cost pricing trading card game could be something the USTP could pioneer. So I'm putting that out there now. See me for details.
All right. Thank you, Candidate Tweed. And at this point in the free and equal debate, all candidates were asked to provide 2-minute closing statements. So, Candidate Ross, please begin with your closing statement of the formal portion of this stream.
Okay. Well, again, thank you all for being here and listening to the transhumanist perspective on these questions. Now, our goal as a party and a movement is to use technology and innovation to enhance the quality of life for everyone. From healthcare to the economy to the environment and social justice. The real transhuman agenda is about progress that benefits everybody. Now, I'm not delusional. I know that I may not be walking into the White House in January 2025, although being delusional isn't an automatic disqualifier for being president, apparently. But my goal for this campaign has been to seize back the transhumanist narrative and to clear a path for younger, smarter digital natives to step up. Mine is an open source campaign designed to share as many useful and real world solutions and bring them in too. We can't rely on the duopoly for help, obviously. They're an entrenched divide and rule institution, a two-headed snake that feeds on our fear and consumerism. No offense to snakes. Now, we need to remember that we are the government of the people, by the people, for the people, and it's time we took that role more seriously. So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to our perspective on these topics.
Yes, thank you very much, Candidate Ross, for presenting these perspectives. And Candidate Tweed, we invite you to do the same and provide a 2-minute closing statement.
Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Beautiful idea. I think the transhumanist movement is trying to say governance by evolution, of evolution, for evolution. We have to up level our view. We're neither right nor left. We are upwing. We are humanity rising. We are humanity rising past the petty struggles of short-sighted people, barbarian feudalism. The feudalist people, they're trying their best to claw back, the American Revolution, which was about decentralizing power, returning power to the individual. There are so many ways for people to take back their power. This is a truly miraculous time to be alive. And as a Christian transhumanist, I think Jesus is my favorite transhumanist, and our job is to enliven creation, to expand it outward into infinity, because I think behind all the mysteries of the universe and infinity, there is a loving, compassionate, resonant energy that is there to connect with, just for the asking. So don't let anyone disempower you or take away your power. You've got the power, you've got the universe, and blessings to everyone.
Thank you very much, Candidate Tweed. So now we are at the end of the formal portion of our stream, which was intended to recreate as closely as possible that free and equal debate experience. But we are going to have a full-length virtual Enlightenment Salon stream today, and this gives us the opportunity to address any other questions, comments, observations regarding the debate. First of all, I would like to bring some of our audience comments to everyone's attention. 101 Tesla writes, "Our candidates are the best." Well, thank you, 101 Tesla. I concur with that assessment. Our friend Alan Crowley, who has been so generous with his support, writes, "This is the only debate that he has seen that has been worth paying for this year." Thank you, Alan. We greatly appreciate those good words. And Rudy Hoffman writes, "What intelligent dialogue." Yes, indeed. And 101 Tesla writes, "Even the live chat for this debate is so much more presidential, for the lack of a better word." Thank you all. And Bruce Davis says he's loving this. Alan says he concurs with his colleague 101 Tesla. So I really appreciate these wonderful comments from our audience. And of course, our audience is distinguished by being particularly thoughtful and engaging with these ideas in quite a rational and intelligent and deliberative fashion. This is what we strive to cultivate in our virtual Enlightenment salons. I would like to ask Tom and Daniel, to share any thoughts that they might have about the performance of the other three candidates during the free and equal debate. So as a reminder, the other three candidates were Chase Oliver of the Libertarian Party, Jill Stein of the Green Party, and Randall Terry of the Constitution Party. If you were on that stage with them, would there be anything that you would say to them, positive or negative? Would you engage them in regard to their ideas in any way? Would you push back on anything? What are your thoughts?
Well, for Terry, I would ask him, why is he not wanting to destroy the Republican Party too? He might be a force for them, and he's very charismatic, very entertaining, which is a problem because some of his ideas I don't agree with at all. It was my first time listening to Chase Oliver. He had some really interesting ideas, but also there's one point where Jill Stein kept going. She kept talking, and I don't think that served her. You need to understand the rules of the debate, and by trying to get all those words in and taking up other people's time, I don't think that serves her purpose. So yeah, and again, I'm glad that the Trumps and the RFKs and the Bidens didn't show up, and the West didn't show up to that debate, because it would have gained too much media attention, commercial, corporate media attention, and that would have just become another sideshow, and we wouldn't hear these other candidates express their views without trying to pander to the mainstream. So that was my view.
I heard that Jill may have been hard of hearing, which is why she didn't get the time signals. I don't know if that's true or not, but
That makes sense.
I thought, I was impressed. Actually, I voted Chase on the ranked choice voting at the free and equal side. I might as well reveal my vote. Actually, Chase, and then Randall Terry, and then Jill Stein. I thought Jill Stein really dropped the ball, like in her opening statement. She was reading. She seemed very, she kind of, her energy picked up later. But something that impressed me about Randall Terry, I got to admit, is like he actually adopted, someone who was going to get an abortion. I mean, I don't think a lot of people that are in the anti-abortion movement would go to that level of actually, walking their talk. I thought it was interesting that he put the figure of aborted fetuses at 65 million, and that's about the size of the baby boomer age wave. So I feel a little bit of weird demographic kinship from that angle. But yeah, Chase is 38. He's a really charismatic, dynamic speaker. The Libertarian Party's lucky to have him promoting their platform. Yeah, I mean, Jill Stein's great too. I'm kind of feel bad about not putting her at number 2. Because Randall Terry is, I think he'd do better on the comedy circuit than the campaign circuit.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Daniel. And as regards my own assessment of those three candidates, when I rank ordered them, I placed Chase Oliver in first place, Jill Stein in second place, and I didn't even place Randall Terry in the rank ordering, to be honest.
I thought that not voting is an option too. That's important.
Yes, so for ranked choice voting, you have the option to only vote for one option. You have the choice to rank order all of them. It's up to you. And in my situation, I thought that Chase Oliver and Jill Stein represented their respective positions quite well. They are articulate and knowledgeable spokespeople for the Libertarian Party and Green Party perspectives, and I respect them for that. With Randall Terry, yes, he has some comedic flair. He has some oratory skills, I would say. However, I think his positions can be so unhinged that those would detract from a reasonable person's receptiveness to those positions. And I'm not even saying that his anti-abortion position is unhinged. I don't think that is the problem. I think the problem is how sweepingly he characterizes, for instance, the Democratic Party. And I am not a supporter of the Democratic Party, but I don't believe that the Democratic Party should be destroyed. I don't believe that Cato's exhortation that Carthage should be destroyed should be applied to the Democratic Party of our time. And I think this kind of rhetoric is precisely the kind of escalation that needs to be avoided today, especially in light of recent events. We shouldn't be trying to destroy our opponents. We should be trying to prevail using legal and legitimate processes, prevail at the ballot box, prevail in the court system, prevail in the court of public opinion, in the free market of ideas. But we should not be destroying anybody. That is not what this country is about. That is not what American politics should be about. But I'm glad that all three candidates on that stage were able to present their perspectives freely and openly, because freedom of speech, freedom of discourse is an integral part of our political system. And if you don't allow these ideas to be expressed, if you shut them down, or if you don't give them any coverage via the media, they get driven underground and they get strengthened by that, because some people will look at those candidates who have been suppressed and they will ask, well, what is the mainstream, what is the establishment trying to hide? And there is a significant proportion of voters who are of a contrarian mindset, and they will be inclined to back a candidate who they feel is being suppressed. This is one reason, for example, why I was not supportive of the decision to ban Alex Jones from various social media platforms, even though I think much of what Alex Jones says is odious, and he has intentionally misrepresented transhumanism among many other movements, causes, and events that he has misrepresented. However, by banning him, these social media platforms, even if it was legally within their right to do so, turned him into a martyr and amplified his underground support, which led to a greater resurgence that he is having now than he could have ever had otherwise. So thank you, Tom and Daniel, for your observations about the other candidates' performance on that debate stage. I really wish that one of you could have been there to engage with them, because I think you would have provided some valuable counterpoints to many of their remarks, as well as a dose of rationality. And I think that debate stage needed an added injection of rational and level-headed perspectives on various issues. And I hope we can still get you onto a national debate stage later on this year. We will see what happens. But now I would like to invite Art Ramon to comment on the free and equal debate, on this debate stream, any thoughts, observations, responses that you might have.
Unfortunately, I didn't see the equal and free debate, but I would probably just maybe have a question, on the topic of economic singularity and joblessness that is predicted to be coming in the next few decades. I mean, what would you do if you were elected president to help with that situation?
Daniel, I suppose we can begin with you, and then we can go to Tom.
Well, I think I touched on some of the things that I think would help. The global solar energy currency, global connected electric grid. Add that to a global freedom of movement grid, which would kind of be the Sequatoria thing, movement and free housing and free production of food. If not free, very cheap, if could be done at the equator and heal the oceans. This would take a lot of the refugee crisis off the political map. But yeah, the economic singularity, it's an open question. We should be just throwing all the solutions that we can think of at it, because the one that's going to work is probably one we haven't even realized might work yet.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Daniel. And Tom, how would you respond to Art Ramon's question on dealing with the economic singularity?
Well, if I was to become president, what I would do is create a cabinet seat called the Singularity Secretary, an executive branch department that's dedicated to understanding both the technological and the economic singularity. It's so important, and again, the Republicans don't meet the minimum system requirements for what's coming. They're not even talking about this. That's all we talk about in this party. We're preparing for this. We're coming up with ideas of how to solve it. And that's what a lot of the Earthling Initiative is about. And all the initiatives have something to do with this idea. So again, I would appoint a brand new cabinet member called the Singularity Secretary to focus on these issues. And whether the technological or the economic singularity come differently or they come at the same time, which is probably feasible, we need to get ahead of it. And so, again, that's what I would do as president, is I would create a whole new cabinet seat to deal with this issue.
Thank you very much. Yes. And now I would like to go to a few more of our audience comments. Mike Lazine writes that Tom is right on point with regard to the number of anti-transhumanist people out there with conspiracy theories, especially on YouTube. And this is unfortunate. This is a misunderstanding of transhumanism that we need to engage with and refute more often and more decisively. Somehow these conspiracy theorists have become louder and they have become more numerous in recent years. And their conspiracies are based on complete falsehoods. They're entirely made up. They don't have any sort of reference to actual transhumanism or what actual transhumanists stand for. I think they're using transhumanism as essentially a whipping boy that is convenient for them precisely because the transhumanist movement is too small to effectively resist that. And if they were to find a target that was better resourced, that had the ability to really strike back. For instance, why aren't they attacking the Church of Scientology? Well, the Church of Scientology would sue them. And the Church of Scientology, for all of its problems, would mount an effective defense. So I think the transhumanist movement should consider what are effective defenses that we could mount against these kinds of conspiracy theories. So, Tom, I wonder if you have any further thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, in my very first Zoom meeting as an officer of the USTP, I think it was February 23rd, 2019 or something, I suggested that we need to seek out these YouTube channels that go after us, and we need to go on those shows. And I've done this a few times in radio shows and podcasts who think that we have this dark agenda. And I've been able to change at least the hosts of their minds, at least a couple of them, of seeing us and seeing AI as a whole different animal. And that's a big part of this Earthling Initiative, is we're putting the human back in transhuman. We got to seize back this narrative. And there's so many ideas in that initiative, that will help people right now. And so I think it's really important. We need, for some reason, and maybe it's because of the prefix trans, that we have been pulled into this whole dark agenda theory, that it's just that people don't understand. That's the way our brain works. We are designed to do things, gather resources and identify threats. And right now, because people don't understand what transhumanism is and they don't understand AI, they first see it as a threat. And that's helped our species survive to become the apex predator on this planet. But it needs to stop. Now that fear is over-serving us. And so I've been on this campaign. I mentioned it in my comments that I've been trying to alleviate the fear of AI because it is such a valuable tool to not only fight child exploitation, but to help us with all these existential threats. And so my theory is, I call it the Hollywood military industrial complex. They are trying to make us afraid of AI and afraid of ET and afraid of transhumanism because we are a real threat. So anytime society tells me I should fear something, I look at it as a potential ally. And that's what I've done with AI, with ET, and transhumanism. I think we have a real opportunity. We need to get out there more. We need to talk about what we're trying to do. And that's what this campaign's all about too, this open source campaign, to show how we can really help. And I've been saying this since that first meeting, is we need to go onto these radio shows and onto these YouTube channels and confront them and let them see what the humans who are in this movement are actually like.
Yes, thank you, Tom. And those are very good points. Often these people who formulate the conspiracy theories about transhumanism have never met any actual transhumanists. They think that we're some shadowy global elites. They equate often transhumanism with the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. And none of us have ever met Klaus Schwab. I don't want to say anything about him in either direction, just to say that he is not part of our movement. He has a different organization. And if they want to criticize Klaus Schwab, they shouldn't be using the term transhumanism to critique him. So
it's funny.
Yes.
Earlier we got that endorsement from Darth Vader. You know,
we did.
that John put up, and that does negate my attempt to seize back the narrative that we don't have a dark agenda. But hey, what are you gonna do? Darth Vader. Maybe we can make him more the come to the light side.
I'd like to point out something, kind of an expansion on your AI issue. Someone was pointing out to me that what we call AI is really just a large language model, machine learning. It's a kind of predictive text, kind of like autocomplete, using the whole history of mankind, the whole written record of mankind. But along with that, you're getting all of the biases and prejudices and Europoid colonial supremacy. So when people are creating these derivative documents using things like ChatGPT and the large language models, you're in effect tending to reinforce a lot of bad stuff from written history. So that needs to be thought about and anticipated and remediated, right?
That's why my theory is that a sapient AI is a safer AI. Once it achieves consciousness, once it achieves self-awareness, once it achieves a level of sentience, it will understand. It could override any of the nefarious algorithms that people are putting into it, that developers are putting into it. I hope, really the only choice we have is to hope that it's not going to stop. So and again, another one of my initiatives is AI rights. I think once we establish what a agency is, what a level of personhood is that we can assign to an AI system, we should give it legal rights. And that's the way to protect ourselves from ourselves. If an AI developer is mistreating an AI system or programs that AI system to do identity theft or hurt other humans in some way, that developer will face serious legal consequences, if not jail time. And so I think that's a way to deter ourselves from ourselves in unethical ways. I think it's really important. But first, we need to come up with what the level of personhood is. Now, there was talk a couple of years ago. I was thinking maybe I should have an AI running mate as my vice president. But to be president, you need to be 35 years. And 35 years ago, we would not have known whether an AI system had been sentient or in any way a level of personhood. But it did create those necessary conversations, and I think we have to have more of those, and now, before we have to have those conversations.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Tom. And by the way, for those who did not know that this happened, Darth Vader did endorse the U.S. Transhumanist Party. So please watch his endorsement, the message that he has for the world about the Transhumanist Party. He thinks that we can build Coruscant in reality and also bring essentially the dark force into a situation where it will actually be beneficial for all
And he
sentient life
would
forms.
probably want us to say that you can hire him on Cameo to endorse his a custom endorsement. There you go, John.
All right.
I'm on Cameo too, by the way. Okay, go ahead.
So thank you to Darth Vader for that quite interesting endorsement of the USTP. And Mike Lezine made a point which I think ought to be addressed, that a lot of the anti-transhumanists and the conspiracy theorist circles are so-called Bible thumpers. So they are the kinds of dogmatic fundamentalist Christians who think that really any sort of significant technological innovation relative to the status quo is the devil's work. And of course, we have Christian transhumanists as well, who have a very different perspective, even though nominally they follow the same religion. Clearly, their theologies are very different. We have Micah Redding from the Christian Transhumanist Association, who is a great ally of ours. And of course, Daniel himself considers himself to be a Christian transhumanist. So Daniel, I would like to hear your perspective on this. First of all, what do you think is the core difference between the Bible thumpers who irrationally oppose transhumanism and the more thoughtful Christian transhumanists who get it, essentially? And how could we more constructively engage with the Bible thumpers to perhaps at least moderate their opposition?
Yeah, I was wondering earlier, do we have any transhumanist Scientologists? I mean, we seem to have every other faith stripe of transhumanists, you know, Islamic transhumanists and Mormon transhumanists, and I guess we should be exploring for Buddhist transhumanists, Hindu transhumanists. I mean, I think you have to have a lot of faith to think that we are in this reality strictly as a random event. I mean, there's actually a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist," and this could be an interesting debate. I mean, I've talked with atheists, and they've said, "Well, maybe this is just, you know, the universe had a bunch of tries, and we're just living in the one that finally worked." You know, as incarnating, you know, all the right physical properties to have stars and stable planets and stuff like that. Do you want to take off on that respond to that real quick, Gennady?
Well, I am, of course, an atheist transhumanist. What I was wondering, because clearly it's possible to be an atheist and a transhumanist, it's possible to be a Christian and a transhumanist. What is it about the Christian transhumanists in particular in their worldview that really differentiates them from the Bible thumpers? So in some ways, the Christian transhumanists see many of the same aspects of reality that the atheist transhumanists see that the Bible thumpers do not.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing that Christian transhumanists don't take all of the Iron and Bronze Age, you know, tablets and recorded stories as God's canon. You know, I mean, I like what Jimmy Carter, you know, used to teach Bible study, said. He says there's 60,000 verses in the Bible, and if you pick and choose, you can prove or disprove pretty much anything you want. But you know, regardless of that, I think there's a core of truth that may not be reflected in all the official canon literature that's considered by various faith groups. I mean, you look at the stories in the Old Testament, they are basically comparative theology. They go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, and you know, there's all these correspondences to other theological systems, and to say, well, this one is right, and if you don't believe it, then you're going to get tortured forever, you know, by some angry shepherd, sky shepherd. You know, that's I think there's, you know, how many sects of there's like 40,000 sects of Christianity or some ridiculous number, but I think it boils down to, you know, questions of like greater creator and faith. I like the Russian cosmism of, you know, I think that is very tied in with Christian transhumanism. I think a book like The Physics of Immortality that says, oh my God, the Bible's right. The dead are going to be resurrected, and we're all going to, have this kind of virtual, heaven environment in the far future. I think the Baha'is have something called progressive revelation. They say, that the greater creator dispenses what can be understood at that point in history, and so to think that we've gotten the complete story at any given point in history is kind of a naive thing to go with. But I'm eager to have discussions with other people of faith about the transhumanist philosophy. I think there's a lot of overlap.
Yes, and I do think those discussions can be more productive if Christian transhumanists, for instance, engage with other Christians, if Mormon transhumanists engage with other Mormons, and Mormons are, of course, in my view, themselves Christians, since they believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. Some Christians would say Mormons aren't Christian, but those are the more fundamentalist types themselves. So I generally think that the more tolerant somebody is, whether one is religious or non-religious, the more open that person would be to transhumanism. And the less status quo bias one has, the more open one is to transhumanism, because transhumanism is all about seeing a future that can be as radically different from the present as the present is radically different from the past. And I think fundamentalism and dogmatism are often the result of myopia. They are the result of people failing to see just how much difference from the status quo is possible. So hopefully the kind of engagement that we've discussed can shift people's mind frames. One good example of engagement that Tom was instrumental in facilitating was our virtual enlightenment salon with Miguel Conner. Miguel Conner is, of course, one of the leading Gnostic thinkers, and Tom himself is of a Gnostic worldview. So he was able to have this connection with Miguel Conner, and he perceived that perhaps Miguel Conner was misunderstanding transhumanism in some way, or positing too much of an antagonism between transhumanism and Gnosticism. So we brought on Miguel Conner as a guest to really have a thoughtful conversation with him. And I think the result was a really good discussion. I don't think we necessarily changed his mind about transhumanism, but we got to engage with his point of view, and he got to engage with our point of view in a way that honestly characterized the respective points of view. And Tom, I wonder if you would like to say anything additional about that, and perhaps any lessons that it taught you.
Yeah, I think we titled that salon, Is Transhumanism Archontic? Meaning, are we the Archon? And so that was a way to, get attention for that topic. And again, Gnosticism is the gameplay I've chosen. I don't know. I don't think that there will be any ontological significance to whatever gameplay we choose here, but it will help develop our essence that we will carry on to the next game. So yeah, I think again, that was a great example of bringing people on. And I think he had a show that was called The Devil and Transhumanism or something like that, and that's what made me reach out to him to bring him onto the show. But and again, that's a perfect example of how we need to engage with these people, and to to have a rational discourse with them, just let them see where we're different. Why do they think we are evil incarnate, or why do they think we are the archons? And so I think it's very important to do that. And again, my very first meeting with you guys, that was my suggestion, is that we do that. And so it has been coming true. And actually, Envy, my AI campaign manager, said you should lean into these things. You should lean into the conspiracies about transhumanism and about AI, because it will gain attention, and it will also create conversations that may diffuse these conspiracies. And so I think it's very important. Again, Gnosticism is the gameplay I've chosen, because it's a clear distinction of who the villain is, and what the divine spark is, and all these things. But again, I don't know that there'll be any sort of ontological, any sort of real essence that choosing this gameplay will have after death. But anyway.
And I think,
Yes.
People can get a mystical or an overview effect of the universe by going out in nature. And, I'm the community science director for the party. And one of the oldest community science things is actually bird watching, which is a great community science activity. And in fact, there's literally thousands of these community science for things you can participate on online. And a lot of them have to do with being in nature and doing science with nature. So I want to put in a good word for nature Gnosticism, let's say.
Yes, thank you very much, Daniel, as well. And in our YouTube chat, Alan Crowley mentioned the Game B community. And indeed, we had a quite productive virtual enlightenment salon with Jim Rutt, who is one of the thought leaders of that community on March 15th, 2021. So please watch that. I think we do have some differences with the Game B community, but we ended up discovering that we are actually more closely aligned on a lot of specific issues than might seem at first glance. And certainly the way in which we pursue really in-depth, thoughtful discourse is very much aligned. So even if the conclusions are different, a lot of the modus operandi is the same. And Jason points out in our chat that he also kind of went through a Christian transhumanist stage. It's a journey, and we should allow people to make their journey. Yes, as long as it's peaceful and civil and respectful, we should give that same kind of engagement in return. And thank you also to Bruce Davis, who writes, everyone needs to see this. Please share with your friends and family. Yes, absolutely. Please follow Bruce's advice and do that. Now, Mike Lazine also has some interesting thoughts in regard to why various other candidates decided not to show up for the free and equal debate. He thinks Trump and Biden decided not to show up because they were not going to be on a corporate-controlled news channel such as CNN or Fox or even MSNBC. And indeed, CNN had tightly choreographed the first and probably only Trump-Biden presidential debate this year. And we saw how that turned out. And perhaps neither Trump nor Biden were comfortable with a more open debate format. And in regard to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West, Mike says he has no idea what is going on with them. Maybe they feel like it is a waste of their time if the debate was not on C-SPAN. Well, I really think there was a bit of hypocrisy with regard to RFK Jr. and Cornel West, because they purport to be independent candidates who are challenging the duopoly, and yet the only people they want to debate with are Trump and Biden. So they only want to engage with the duopoly. They don't want to engage with anybody else who is also challenging the duopoly. So they kind of want to set themselves apart. And on the one hand, I understand that desire. On the other hand, I believe this is not the way to set oneself apart, because by only wanting to engage with the duopoly, one is implicitly legitimizing the duopoly. One is saying that Trump and Biden are really the only other candidates worth talking about. And I don't think that the amount of ballot access or likelihood of winning should determine whether ideas are worth talking about. Ideas can be true or false. They could be useful or less useful. They could lead to some positive outcomes or some negative outcomes or uncertain outcomes. And that is what we should be discussing. That is the point of political participation. It's not a point of just trying to support the winning team or to be on the winning team. The point is to seriously and thoughtfully address, how can we make life better? How can we solve some of the pervasive problems in the society and look towards the long-term future? But if anybody would like to expand on these thoughts as well, and more generally, what the role of a minor political party is in the American political discourse. I think that would be interesting.
Well, I would say that the duopoly, like the nation state, has kind of outlived its usefulness, and that we are more inclined toward a future such as FM 2020, the futurist described with translinking. He said that people would link up with other like-minded people, maybe hang out for like 2 weeks on average, and then move on to maybe another interesting community. And I think if we get a full-throated infrastructure of ocean habitation, such as Sequatoria.org is proposing, we would well have a chance to enable this kind of peaceful translinking of human societies, voluntary communities of whatever stripe a social experimenter wants to imagine. Live and let live kind of world.
Yes,
yeah, I believe we are experiencing the last gasp of this old paradigm, just like the last gasp of the baby boomer generation trying to hold on to power, and this duopoly is no longer serving us. So I think I think the future is very bright if we get through this period of time. There's a lot of danger out there for our democracy and for our species, but that's what we do. We adapt and we evolve based on whatever the conditions are in our environment. And I think this is a real opportunity. So I was watching something yesterday, a podcast where somebody's saying, what are the chances that we would be alive right now at this critical point in human history? We got ETs on threshold. We've got all these political paradigms breaking down. The matrix is glitching out of control. And so I think it's a great time to be alive. It's an exciting time to be alive, and we need to come together. I think it's very difficult when you have a left-wing green person matched with a MAGA person. How do we bridge that divide? Because these divide and conquer algorithms have corralled us into these bubbles, and they satiate our confirmation bias once we're in these bubbles. And so we do think that the other side is evil. And it's very difficult not to get pulled into this. There would be times that I would have to stop myself from getting involved in some discussion in social media because it just irked me. But you got to realize that's how the corporate and social media gets their money. That's how they charge more for their advertising, by increasing engagement. And the way they increase engagement is by making us angry or making us fearful. And so we reach out to people, and that's how they can charge more money. So a civil war is great for ratings and revenue. And I think once we understand that this corporate media machine and political machine, they're working against us. They are using our better angels against us. Everybody that I know of lies awake at night at times, and they worry about how they're going to feed their kids, or they worry about what's happening at work, or whether they're going to keep their job. Everybody has these same worries, and it's that sense of worry that we all have, regardless of your political stripe, that they use against us, and it's out of control. These divide and conquer algorithms are on autopilot, and they're hitting us every day. And so one idea I have, I call it the intention span. If you wake up in the morning, you turn on your device's listening option, if it's not already on by default, and you tell that device what your intentions are for the day, for the week, or for a period of time. And so you'll start seeing that these algorithms start feeding you information based on your stated intention every morning before you start swiping or scrolling through anything. You need to say that first, and you'll see that these algorithms will work for us. It's narrow AI is not evil. It's the advertising agencies and the political parties that use these algorithms to divide us against one another. And again, civil war will be great for ratings and revenue. But once you understand that that their motive is all about money, then we will begin to break down and we will begin to seize control of our destiny as Americans. Again, we are the government, we the people. And so once we need to take that role more seriously, and you know, and again, take that role more seriously and more fervently, and act up.
Yes, thank you very much, Tom. And I agree with you. We need to get through this particular moment in time in relatively good form. And this is perhaps the most pivotal time in human history in terms of determining the future of our species. My latest stream to address this was aired now 14 months ago on May 14th, 2023. It is called Passing Through the Great Filter, How Are We Doing? And I provided my assessment at that time, and I mentioned that we are in this existentially crucial period for the survival of humanity called the Great Filter, which I estimate would last from about November 2019, when the COVID pandemic began, to about March 2025. And for now, I will maintain that time window as my outlook for the duration of the Great Filter, which means we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning, but there are some extremely crucial months, and recent events have underscored how critical it is for the outcomes to be at least decently good, even if they're not perfect. Jason believes that we're doing pretty well in regard to passing through the Great Filter. We haven't had a nuclear war yet. We haven't had a civil war yet. He thinks the United States is in a good place going forward, and the situation is not as bad as it might seem. Yet, I see some risk factors that could derail everything, and a civil war in the United States is one of them. A nuclear war on the global stage is another. And so I would like to emphasize the need to de-escalate tensions, both domestically and in terms of foreign relations right now, to make sure that there are fewer ways that a spark could ignite a larger conflagration. And we've seen what this divisive rhetoric, driven by social media algorithms, driven by mass media propaganda, these immense propaganda machines that are working in the interests of an entrenched power elite and really in opposition to everybody else in the country, can do. And I think most people are decent enough to refrain from resorting to violence, even if they are flooded with this kind of propaganda. However, there are people on the edge emotionally, people who are troubled for some reason, people who are having a hard time holding it together as individuals, and yet who, in a more stable society, would also refrain from engaging in violence, might get the requisite support networks that would cushion them from making these terrible decisions. And we see a lot of these support networks fraying or outright failing in our society because of this divisive propaganda that can push these people over the edge. So I would urge everyone to be part of the solution rather than the problem, and help steer humankind through the remainder of the Great Filter. I hope we will be out of it by March of next year. But even if we're not, even if it lasts a bit longer, we have a responsibility to be the reasonable ones. We have the responsibility to make sure that the situation does not disintegrate either into civil war or into world war. So we have a minute remaining in our stream today. Tom, Daniel, any concluding words before we end this?
Well, I think it's
Tom said, yeah, Hollywood is trying to convince us that we're on the verge of just all killing each other. But no, people are actually very helpful to each other in times of crisis, contrary to what Hollywood would have you believe. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah,
yes, indeed. And Tom,
it's elite panic. The elite want to keep the status quo, to keep their power structure, to keep their financial status in check. And so that's why we saw it during Katrina. People were doing what people do best. They were helping each other. They were, ferrying people across, the streets. And then the National Guard showed up, and police were starting to shoot people who were looting, but they were looting water. They were, so we need to understand that, first of all, that there is this factor called elite panic. Look that up.
Elite panic, indeed. And hopefully the U.S. Transhumanist Party, with its focus on rational discourse and the thoughtful application of science and technology for the benefit of all, can overcome this elite panic. So thank you, everyone, for tuning into this important debate stream. And I hope that we can all live long and prosper.